All right, what's up everybody? If you wonder why I got this weird little headphone in my ear, you'll understand in a minute. But welcome to another Drumdums Top 5, and I have a special guest with me today. I got a good friend, Cody Leach, and he's the one that introduced me to this whole idea of doing a collaboration at the same time. So you're gonna see Cody in this video and me at the same time. But first and foremost, Cody, go ahead and introduce yourself.
What's going on, everybody? And hey, I got the same exact thing in my ear. We match. Got a very similar channel to what Lee does. Just do movie reviews. I do some music and video game reviews on occasion, trailer reactions. I do a lot of top 5 videos as well. So yeah, just come over there and check out some stuff, and also check out our last collaboration that we did, our top 5 horror sequels. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that, but you did the work for me. Thank you. But anyway, let me set the ground rules. We're doing a top 5. And we're gonna do Millennium horror. So anything after the year 2000 is fair game, and as you probably can guess, that opens up a lot of possibilities. So this was kind of a tough list for us to come up with, but we also have 4 honorable mentions. We're just gonna roll right through those real quick, and then we're gonna get right into the top 5. So I'm gonna let Cody go first. Cody, what are your honorable mentions, man?
Yeah, I got to go ahead and just echo what you said. This is probably, I've been doing top 5 lists for almost a year now. This is probably the hardest one I've ever had to do, to try to narrow down to 5. So I got 4 honorable mentions like Lee already mentioned. I'm going to start off with one that's very, very recent, and that's why it's in my honorable mentions, just because I kind of need to let the movie age a little bit before I stick it in my top 5, and that's Don't Breathe. I thought that was just an awesome movie from last year. I think it was my favorite or my second favorite movie of last year. Fede Alvarez is just an awesome director. He's a horror director to keep your eye on.
Oh, yeah.
I love Stephen Lang in that movie. I love the characters, our prey, if you will. Very cool take on a home invasion film. The next one on my list is It Follows, one of the coolest like throwback art films. I mean, it's got some artsiness to it. It's got some very 80s Carpenter-ish vibes to it. It's very metaphorical with the story and with the villain. You know, it's talking about not being very promiscuous, and you know, sex itself is coming after you. So very cool movie. The Descent, another one that's awesome. You have one of the best movies as far as strong female characters. There's not a strong male character in sight unless one of the demons are males, which you never find out. But you have a really great cast. You got great monsters, really atmospheric, really claustrophobic. I actually rewatched that movie about a month ago, and I forgot how claustrophobic that movie makes me. Even before the demons show up, even if the demons never showed up in that movie, it would be a great effective horror movie, but they just add a great little spin to it. And my last one is a movie that I don't hear get very much praise very often, so I want to give it a little bit of love on this list, and that's Joyride. It's a little movie with Steve Zahn and Paul Walker. You got them, basically they prank this truck driver on the road. Rusty Nail is kind of his CB handle, and the guy gets really pissed off that they mess with him, and he just comes after them with everything that he has. Very cool thriller horror movie, pretty gruesome in spots. I've always had a lot of fun with that movie. Don't hear it get mentioned very often, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw that one out there.
Hell yeah. Come in, Candy King.
Yeah, exactly.
But a couple of those are going to get mentioned again, possibly. So I'm glad you did. Yeah. You only scratched the surface. So real quick, my honorable mentions. Number 9 is going to be The Strangers. I think The Strangers is probably one of the best home invasion flicks. I like how it kind of deals with this couple that's going through a divorce. And can you imagine, just, you know, you're already tense because of your current situation with your spouse, and then you have this home invasion situation that's just horrible. So yeah, that's my number 9. Number 8 is actually going to be High Tension. It's my first foreign film of the list, and High Tension is it's a good one to mention because of the twist. It's a controversial twist. Some people don't like it, some people do, but I think it's really well done. There's a little love infatuation going on there too.
Just a little.
But the big thing too is it's dark and brutal and gritty as hell. Number 7 is going to be a recent movie, actually. It's going to be M. Night Shyamalan's Split, and I'm so glad that M. Night is back. Split was a return to form. I just rewatched it again recently, and that third act is just legendary. So creepy, and I love the score to it too. Especially in the third act, the score is just insane, and I can't not mention James McAvoy. His performance, Oscar-worthy, people, Oscar-worthy. And then my number 6 is going to be a remake, actually. It's going to be Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead remake. And to make this list as a remake, it's not an easy thing to do, but the Evil Dead remake separates itself pretty far from the original trilogy. It's a very different film. It focuses on straight up horror. There's nothing funny about it whatsoever. And I think you had to do that if you don't have Ash in the movie. And it did it perfectly. I love Jane Levy's performance in it, about how she was this drug addict. And they came up with a good reason for keeping her at the cabin. But love the Evil Dead remake. Okay, with the honorable mentions out of the way, Cody, shoot me your number 5, brother.
All right. Well, my number 5, and it's funny that you just mentioned Evil Dead because this movie just edged out Evil Dead because I absolutely love that movie, but I only wanted to have one remake on my list, and that's Dawn of the Dead. I absolutely love Dawn of the Dead remake. It was one of the first, like, George Romero style zombie movies that I ever saw, even though it's the remake, it's not the classic one. I think that Zack Snyder gets hated on way too much. I think that's an awesome horror movie. It's probably my favorite zombie movie. I love all of the characters in it. I mean, he did a really good ensemble cast. They all have their own personality. They all kind of have their own quirks. They all interact really well with each other. I love the fast zombies. Like we gushed about 28 Weeks Later in our last collaboration because of the fast zombies, and that's probably, alongside 28 Weeks Later, my favorite take on the fast, vicious zombies. I mean, from start to finish, that movie is just a thrill ride. I mean, the opening scene just grabs you by the throat. Whenever you finally get to the mall, I mean, a place that's so huge and vast suddenly becomes claustrophobic and like atmospheric at the same time. Just love everything about that movie. It's an absolute blast to watch. It's scary as hell. It's fun, and I can't say anything more about it. Just that's my favorite zombie movie of all time, so I had to throw it on there.
Yeah, it's actually on one of my other top 5s that I did, top 5 zombie films. I actually prefer it to the original, and I know that's a bold statement, but I think it does what a remake should do. It's just close enough to the original, but it definitely makes its own footprint. It's a really modern take on the original, and it fits in with the times perfectly, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. It's great, and that the zombie baby is one of the creepiest scenes I've ever seen in a zombie film, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 5 is gonna be Trick or Treat, the anthology from 2009, I think. Am I right on that, Cody?
It sounds right, yeah.
It sounds right to me too. I like it. So, but yeah, Trick or Treat. It's crazy. This movie was not released in theaters nationwide, and talk about the biggest blunder I've ever seen. Because I think if this movie did come out in theaters, it would have been huge. But luckily, it found its audience. It's considered a cult classic. People watch it every single year now on Halloween, and it's such a fun ride. It's an anthology. You got 4 or 5 different stories there, and you have a horror icon of the Millennium. You got Sam, and I think Sam's one of the few successful horror icons, and they've only had one movie with the character. So, what are your thoughts on Trick or Treat, Cody?
I love the hell out of that movie, and I actually left it off on purpose because I had a sneaking suspicion you'd pick it. So I'm glad that, I'm glad you didn't make me feel like a fool. But Trick or Treat, yeah, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with anthology movies, so that's a movie that took me a very long time to give it a chance. I don't think I watched it until like 2014. Like, I just picked it up on a whim. I found it in a bargain bin at Walmart. I'm like, you know what? I'm in the mood for a horror movie. Let me check this thing out. And from the opening scene, I'm like, this is awesome. I mean, that's one of the few anthologies I can think of where every single story is great. From the opening scene to the crazy teacher who's trying to carve his own version of a jack-o'-lantern, to the girls who seem like they're going to be the victims who end up being the werewolves. I mean, everything
that's
about
my
that
favorite
movie,
one.
Yes, everything about that movie is just such an awesome ride. I love how it's kind of told in like a Tarantino style where it's not necessarily one flowing narrative. It kind of goes back and forth, and you get to see past scenes and later on scenes, and such an awesome movie. And just like you said, it's a Halloween staple for me. Some point in the month of October, that movie gets popped into my house.
Oh, always. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is a movie that I'm glad to be talking about because not very many people know about it, not very many people talk about it. That's Session 9. Now, this is another movie that I got to very, very late because I think it's like 2001 that it came out. I didn't watch it until like 2013, 2014. This movie is one of the greatest horror movies ever made as far as tone and as far as atmosphere, because it's not like a slasher movie. It's not really like a gore fest. There's not like some demon or something like that coming for them. It's literally just these guys, they get hired to take out all the asbestos and do this cleanup in this old abandoned insane asylum. And that insane asylum is the star of the movie. From the time that you first walk in, I mean, it's one of those movies where you turn the lights off, you turn your surround sound up, and you grab somebody next to you for whenever some scares come, because the tone, the sounds, especially the sounds whenever they start getting into, they call it session 9 because there's these 9 tapes of this one patient's sessions with their psychiatrist, and every time they listen to one, it's the same effect that I get whenever I first watched Black Christmas and you get those phone calls. It's the same effect as those scenes, whenever you just hear the voices and it just chills you down to your spine. So that's a movie that I've always gushed about. I always recommend when somebody says, what's a good horror movie that I haven't seen yet? I'm like, I guarantee you haven't seen this one. So for anybody watching, if you have not seen Session 9, seek it out. It came on Blu-ray about 2 months ago, which I'm so glad that it finally got a release. Check that one out.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I've never seen Session 9. It's one that I don't even hear about that often. And I remember you posted it on Killer Flicks, I think, a few months ago, and it piqued my interest. So now that I know it's in your top 5, then now I definitely have to check it out. So
yeah, dude. I mean,
check it out.
It's made for TV. It's a USA Network TV movie.
No kidding.
Yeah, and you would never know it if I didn't tell you that. But yeah, definitely check it out, man. Because if you like atmospheric tone, like just chilling you down to your bone, there's nothing better.
Cool. My number 4 is actually another foreign film. It is Let the Right One In. And it's hard for a foreign film to make my list of top 5. Not to be, like I guess prejudiced or anything against foreign films, but it's just such a powerful film. And I'm really picky when it comes to vampire movies.
I am
and
too.
There's not that many great ones these days. There's fun ones like the Underworld series, but to really make a scary, creepy vampire movie, Let the Right One In does it perfectly. And it focuses on children, which makes it even creepier. The story itself is creepy because this child, she is literally, I don't know, maybe 100 years old, something like that. And she has to take care of this old man who used to be a child himself. And so it's like she's bouncing from child, and then 60 years go by and she goes to another child. So it's really interesting. It's emotional. It's really sad sometimes, actually. And it's got a crazy ending. So Let the Right One In is definitely my number 4. What are your thoughts on that one?
I've actually never seen it. I've seen Let Me In. So it's been
on
my
that's
list.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's been on my list of things to check out because I basically hear it's very, very close to the same movie. It's almost just a shot-for-shot remake.
It is.
So for the most part, I know exactly the scenes you're talking about. And yes, that's one of my favorite vampire movies. Like if we were doing a top 5 vampire movie list of the past, the Millennium, that would be on my list for sure. I really enjoy the take on that. It's such a different, dark take on the vampire story because, like you said, I mean, I'm a vampire fanatic, and it's slim pickings when it comes to good vampire movies.
It really is.
So yeah, the whole revelation about the old man, and I don't know if it's the same exact scene in the foreign film, but like whenever he finds the little pictures and realizes that the old man was her boyfriend at one point, a little boy.
Yeah, that's in the original too. Yeah. And I'm not being biased by saying, hey, I need to pick the original because it's the original. No, I think the original is the better movie, but Let Me In is actually one of the better remakes out there. So
yeah,
I'm not surprised that you actually enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I love the hell out of that movie. So yeah, and the ending, yeah, like you said, the ending is awesome. That last scene, not going to give it away for those of you who haven't seen it, but yeah, it definitely it wraps everything off with a punch.
Definitely. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is another smaller movie that not many people have seen, Frailty. Now, I'm not sure if
another
you're
one I haven't
with this
seen.
one. That is, I'm not sure if it's his only movie, but I think it's the directorial debut of Bill Paxton. God rest his soul. Wow. But
rest in
basically,
peace.
Frailty is the story of, Bill Paxton is this dad. He's a single parent of these 2 young boys. And he comes home randomly one night and says, God has put me on a mission. He wants me and you to go out and destroy demons. And you have one kid that's totally up for it, has total faith in his father, and you have the other kid that thinks his dad just went off the deep end and is trying to save all these people that his dad is murdering. And it's such a crazy movie because you have this dad, it's kind of a faith-based horror movie in a way, because he's so passionate about his mission from God. God sending him to literally murder people, and his other son is like, I don't see what you're doing, you're just killing people. And it's this crazy back and forth, because you never know all the way up until the end of the movie if the dad is crazy or if the kid is just a non-believer. And the whole struggle between father and son is this great dynamic. Bill Paxton is just totally knocks it out of the park with his direction. There's some great scenes as far as cinematography. Like, one of my favorite scenes is whenever he first finds his weapons, and there's like this beam of light coming down from the heavens into this barn that's shining on this axe, and just the words Otis on that axe has always kind of been very iconic for me. And the ending of the movie, which I'm not going to give away, is one of the craziest and coolest twists in a horror movie, because as soon as everything just gets flipped on its head, and Matthew McConaughey plays the older version of the little boy, it just wraps your mind. You're like, what did I just experience? And you want to flip the movie right back to the beginning and watch it all the way through again. It's just a wild movie. Not too many people talk about it, so I got to throw it out there. I absolutely love it. Frailty is my number 3.
Well, ever since Bill Paxton died, there's been a few of his movies that I've wanted to catch up on that I haven't seen. Frailty's one of them. Near Dark is another one. But as far as the subject matter for Frailty, I think it's always interesting when you mix religion with horror movies, because there's a lot of different ways you can go with that. But I'm a huge fan of Matthew McConaughey too, so that was definitely going on my list. Thank you. And my number 3. Let me look at it again. Yeah. And my number 3 is actually a remake of a movie that I haven't seen, but it's such a great film that I had to throw it on my list, and it's Maniac with Elijah Wood. It's very unique because it's told in the first person, and usually those type of films, if the whole movie is first person, it can get annoying after a while. I've seen music videos that are all first person, and I get a headache. But for some reason, this one really works because you are in the mind of a psychopath. And his little killing niche that he does is he scalps his victims. And so I thought that was a cool little added, violent effect, because every killer, they got to have their trademark. And his trademark is he scalps his victims. This movie does not hold back. It's really bloody. Sometimes it feels almost art house. The score is excellent. If you want a highbrow horror film that has great performances, especially by Elijah Wood, and has a crazy ending, metaphorical ending even, then you definitely want to check out Maniac. Have you seen Maniac?
I have seen the remake, and I have not seen the original. So if my buddy Anthony is watching, please do not cuss us out in the comment section. I'll see it eventually. But yeah, the remake, it's a wild movie. It's very. I need to watch it again because it's a movie you can't quite experience in its full one time.
Yeah.
When the movie first opens up, the first thing that hits me is the score, just like you mentioned that, so I'm glad you brought that up. It has, if I remember correctly, it's a very kind of 80s synth kind of score, and it fits the tone of the movie very well, and it kind of adds to the eeriness because it has like this street level grind to it. And the POV is something really interesting because, just like you said, that's something that could be very gimmicky. It could be very annoying. It can get drawn out way too long. But somehow that movie made it work very well. And you got a guy like Elijah Wood who's not like a little known actor. I mean, the dude was in Lord of the Rings. He was in all these things. And
pretty
you
heavy
barely
star,
see him. You see him in a few reflections here and there. And I'd be curious to see how they filmed that movie. Like if he just stood by the cameraman the whole time and just kind of echoed his lines out or what. But it's bloody, it's brutal, it's macabre. Very interesting movie. So yeah, it's definitely...
It's kind of got like a Nicholas Winding Refn feel to it.
Just
a bit, yeah. But what's your number 3?
Number 2?
Number 2, yeah. Go ahead. What's your number 2?
All right, my number 2. So this is another movie that's a little bit underknown, kind of a theme in my list. This is a movie that I constantly throw out there to people who want good slasher movies, and that's The Collector. I was a huge fan of this movie when it first came out, and unfortunately, I still think it's the best kept secret in slashers, and it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in slashers because due to the marketing. Part of it because everybody was just all about Saw at the time. They didn't really want to see anything else except Saw sequels, but this movie kind of flew under the radar when it came out. And much like Don't Breathe, it's a really cool spin on a home invasion movie because you got this guy who comes in, he's trying to rob these people that he works for, and while he's robbing them, unbeknownst to him, the collector has entered the house, locked all the doors, shut all the exits, and he's getting ready to murder this family. And now he is stuck in this hell house, and he has to find a way out. But also he's kind of struggling with his morals. Do I save the family? Do I save myself? And it's a really cool movie because you have, the slasher kind of cliche is that you have a lot of stupid characters, and there's not really any stupid characters in The Collector.
No,
the guy is a
not.
very strong, very smart protagonist. He's very likable. Even though he's doing a bad thing, you want him to make it out of it. The Collector, from his look to the way that he takes these people out, is a very, very cool villain. And the movie doesn't hold anything back as far as the gore, as far as the brutality. There's some Saw traps style to it because it was actually originally conceived as a prequel to Saw, but luckily they went a different way with it. And I love the ending too, because one thing about the Collector series, and the Collection is an awesome sequel too, just not quite as good as the original. That's why the original's on this list. It kind of gives the middle finger to horror movie cliches, and I love that, because if you're a horror fan, no matter how many movies you watch, eventually you get tired of the cliches, and The Collector is anything but a cliche. So absolutely love that movie. Huge recommendation for that one.
I always wonder, like, what if The Collector actually came out before Saw? Because it actually came out just a couple years, I think, after Saw. Would it have been a bigger hit? Because it is a great film, and I think that premise is genius. You have a house that's being robbed, and then a killer comes into the house while it's being robbed. To me, that's just so interesting. I want to be a fly on the wall, and I want to see what's going to happen in that situation. And then it be as dark and brutal and graphic as it is. And I'm surprised I haven't seen The Collection yet. It's almost. I remember seeing the Collector in the theater with my wife. And it is so graphic, and it's not for everybody. But it's one that I've been meaning to check out again, so I'm glad you mentioned it, because I definitely want to check it out again.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a rewatch, and if you love The Collector, like I said, The Collection is just, it's fractions, not quite as good as The Collector, but like I told you on Scream Stream, the ending of The Collection is one of the greatest endings to any horror movie ever.
Yeah, I gotta see that. I have to. My number 2 is one that was one of your honorable mentions, and it is It Follows.
Yeah.
I love It Follows. It's so good. There's so many things you can say about it. The score by Disasterpiece, one of my favorite scores of the last 20 years. The Halloween-inspired, almost Kubrick-inspired at times. The originality of the premise with sex really being the killer. I mean, there's just so many things to really study about this film, even because it's so unique. David Robert Mitchell really created, I think, a modern classic. I think 10 years from now, people are going to be talking about It Follows and how unique it was. And I've said so much about it on my channel. I'm sure you've said some things about it. It's phenomenal. I love It Follows, and I know you already talked about it in your honorable mention section. So I'll just go right ahead and go straight to your number 1. What's your number 1?
My number 1 is a very well-known movie. So now we're getting away from all the obscure ones. Jeepers Creepers.
Oh yeah.
I love the hell out of this movie. I know that it's got some controversy to it because it's directed by a child molester, which is something that's never going to escape, unfortunately. But Jeepers Creepers is one of the greatest monster movies that's ever been made, and it's yet to be topped, in my opinion. Like, that movie just takes you on such a ride because you have no idea where you were going. From the opening frame, when that truck comes in, and just the honking of a truck chills you down to your spine. And then you get to the scene where it almost feels like it's going to go in slasher territory whenever they see him dumping the bodies. And then all of a sudden there's this, Sistine Chapel of bodies all over the place. I mean, the movie just unfolds and unfolds and unfolds until you are in this hell of this monster movie, and one of the coolest, most creative villains in The Creeper. I love the 2 leads. It's one of the few horror movies in modern times, for the most part, that both of the leads are awesome. Even though they do some stupid things, mostly on Justin Long's character, they're both entertaining as hell. And you will be hard-pressed to find 2 people that will sell you as good as they do that they are siblings. Because the sibling rivalry that they have in that movie, you would swear that they're brother and sister. I mean, they just, from the very opening frame, you're like, dude, this is brother and sister for real. They're not even acting. I just love how they incorporate things as simple as the license plate of the truck to the actual song, Jeepers Creepers. I'm so excited to see what he's going to do with the third one now that he's finally getting it made. I mean, he's been, blocked so many times to get this movie made. The second one's really enjoyable too, but the first one is just iconic to me, all the way up to the final frame, which is just like in the collection, is one of the coolest endings to a horror movie because you just don't expect it at all. And then the last 2 minutes or so just haunt you.
Definitely. I'm glad you mentioned the sibling thing, because even in my review for this movie, I harped a lot on how original it was to actually have siblings, brothers and sisters. And not only that, but the Justin Long and the girl, I forget her name, but they did such a great job. And like you said, you completely buy their chemistry. The ending is so unique. I don't want to give it away. I wish I could, because I love talking about that ending, but that ending is just genius.
Yes.
The Creeper is one of the most original looking killers I've ever seen, even though the Wishmaster does kind of look like him. But yeah, Victor Salvo, he created an icon. And, that whole controversy with Victor Salvo, I think some of the greatest stories come from the most demented minds. And of course, what he did was just completely horrible.
Yeah.
But 100 years from now, people aren't going to be talking about Salvo. They're going to be talking about Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, exactly.
So am I glad the movie still came out? I am. I'm not going to lie. I'm glad that we still have such a fantastic horror film. And my number one, because that was your number one, right?
That was my number one.
That was your number one, okay. And I didn't put, I thought about Jeepers Creepers, but for some reason I was like, I bet that'll make your list. So I decided to hold it off. My number one is The Descent. You talked about The Descent, but The Descent is one of my favorite, it's in my top 10, 15 films of all time. I often compare it to The Thing because there's just so many similarities, because this is an all-girl crew, whereas in The Thing it was all guys. It deals with paranoia like The Thing. You really don't even need the creatures in the movie, and I'm already sold. By the time the creatures show up, I am so enthralled. I'm already gripping my seat, just because of the relationship between these girls. And then you have Sarah and Juno, and they're just two interesting characters. Juno's not really a bad guy, and Sarah's not really the best. It's just, there's so much to chew on with The Descent, and it's one that I just constantly love. One of the most emotional scores in a horror film I've ever heard. Two different endings. I love I think it's the UK ending. I think that's the ending you want to go with.
Yeah,
but
unrated one.
yeah, I can't say enough about The Descent. That's why it easily made my number one. Anything else you want to say about The Descent before we close it out?
Well, I'm glad you were talking about the main characters of Sarah and Juno, because one thing, I was talking about them being strong female characters, but also one thing that they nailed is they're very human characters. They make human mistakes. They're very flawed. I mean, even like you said about Juno, she's portrayed somewhat as the villainous, if there is a villain there, somewhat, but she makes human mistakes, and like you said, she's not really a bad guy. Like, she makes a really bad mistake as far as, the affair, and then she's trying to mend her ways with her friends, and then, very, very understandable mistake, even though it's horrifying whenever she accidentally kills one of them, thinking that, she's about to get killed herself. So that movie really explores a lot of humanity while kind of in this hell with all the farthest thing from humans, these little demons walking around. But yeah, that's a really unique movie. It's really well made, and like I said, above anything else, it's just claustrophobic as hell. I was watching it a month ago, and I'm like, I need more space.
Yeah, and while we're talking about humanity, you could look at Sarah's actions at the end of the movie, and not everybody's going to agree with it. It's pretty controversial.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about how it handles characters. It's really not about who's good and who's bad. Like you said, it's about humanity, and it just gives you a lot of fat to chew on, really. But anyway, that's our top 5 Millennium horror films. Had a great time doing this. I'm going to post a card to our previous top 5 that we did. When you get over there, make sure you sub Cody's channel. I promise you won't regret it. He just dropped his Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 review. I just watched it. One thing you're gonna love about Cody is his intros are really funny. So he sets you right up, settles you in for his review. But and he gives good long reviews too, which I like. Some reviewers, they give like maybe 3-minute, 5-minute reviews, and he's one of those. He digs deep into a movie, and I like reviewers like that. So definitely check him out. Thank you so much, Cody. Any parting words from you before we go?
Just a huge thank you for once again letting me on your channel. I love being over here, and I love doing these top fives. It's always such a great back and forth whenever you compare lists, because we can agree on how awesome these movies are, and yet we have completely different lists, so it's always a lot of fun. But yeah, just if you guys want to go over and check out my channel, I promise there's a lot of stuff over there you'll enjoy, and like I said, definitely check out the last collab we did, and look out for even more, because I'm sure you'll see me and Lee on each other's channel in the future. Yeah,
this is the second of many. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you look down below, you can see all my social media links. If you like what I'm doing, please hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Check out Cody's channel. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.